Welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge. A very funny thing is that in our Profiler training course, one of the questions that we recommend people use when they're first, sort of trying to massage their profiling chops, when they're first trying to figure this skill out, we use questions that are like starter questions that help people determine the dichotomies: introversion, extroversion, sensing, intuition, and so on. And one of the questions that we give them as a starter question is we paint what we call a nightmare scenario. And that nightmare scenario is, would you rather spend 7 days completely alone, like 100%, and you don't even have access to the outside world, like no internet, no ability to call anybody. It's just you and your brain. And I mean, you can read, you can do other activities, but 7 days you have no human contact. Or would you prefer 7 days where you have perpetual human contact? Like, let's pretend it was this family reunion where for 7 days you were always around people. And they could be people, like some people that you love and know, like family, and others that are maybe relative strangers. But for 7 days, with the exception of the time you're sleeping, you have to be around people. And it's not we say there's no silver bullet question. So it's not anything that's like that's not going to be definitive. If a person says, I'd prefer to be alone, they're an introvert, or I'd prefer to be around other people, they're an extrovert. It's just kind of a starter question to get a conversation going. But at no point did I ever think that question, that nightmare, or the choice between two nightmare scenarios would ever become people's reality. And yet, here we are.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't think it was going to happen either. In fact, it's one of those things like sometimes people answer so quickly how they would feel about it. And I'm like, remember, you're going to not have anyone around you for 7 days. Like, yeah, no, I'd love it. I'd love it. It'd be great. It'd be awesome. I would totally be able to do that. And I'm thinking, okay, you say that now, but could you really handle being in isolation for that long? And I bet you it's a surprise to some people right now that would have answered that question like, I'm fine. They might reevaluate that question in the future. I bet that question is going to be a better starter question for conversations going forward than it ever has been in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And to piggyback off that, we actually have a little better because in the question, there's no way to engage with the outer world. There's no internet access. There's no phone calls. And while we're going through this quarantine at this time period in history, there is access to people, right? You can do virtual meetups and you can do virtual hangouts and you can call people and keep in touch. So it's actually a little more of a neutered, quote unquote, nightmare scenario. But I don't think that people are dealing with it as well as they thought they would.
I've been thinking a lot about jail, prison, and house arrest the last couple of weeks. How, you hear about somebody on house arrest. Oh, they have like an ankle bracelet. They've got to stay at home. Oh, boo-hoo. That's really tough on them. I'm realizing like a 2 or 3 year house arrest, that's a pretty severe sentence after being at home for like 3 weeks now. I'm like, wow, that's kind of tough to manage. You can't go anywhere for like years at a time. I can't imagine what that would be like. Like at first I thought that'd be easy. I bet that's more difficult than you would think.
Yeah, I've got a little bit more sympathy for people in that situation. I mean, it's better than prison, but
even people locked up. Like, I mean, can you imagine like just being in a cell?
Yeah. Oh, no, I can't.
Like out for an hour a day or something. Like
yeah.
That like I already have trauma around that. And like now, because I'm an EP, right? My freedom being taken away is like horrifying. And I really, like it's visceral now. It's not just a theory in my head. It's like I feel it a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and so we usually do evergreen content. We call it evergreen content in the sense that we don't like to quote unquote timestamp our podcast in like the timeline of our lives. We don't usually talk about current events. It's very rare when we do that because we want it to be useful, in perpetuity. But we got a lot of requests to talk about how different personality types are dealing with the current situation in the world with COVID-19 or coronavirus, and maybe some recommendations for how to navigate through, or maybe just a conversation sympathizing with what people are going through. Because there's a lot of material right now. I think people are writing a lot of things and producing a lot of content around trying to get through this. But I think that it's going to be a little different for every person depending upon their personality type. So maybe just having a conversation around how different types are experiencing it will help people determine what's the best advice for them personally. So as I was thinking about this podcast, I realized there's four primary situations people find themselves in. We have introverts and extroverts, and I think that's the tendency I've seen, even with people who are not into personality types. Most people know what an introvert and an extrovert is. And so a lot of the conversation is around how introverts are dealing with the self-isolation, the social distancing, and the quarantining versus extroverts. But I think there's like four different possible scenarios. There are extroverts who are quarantined by themselves because they live alone. And there are extroverts that are quarantined with their family or maybe roommates. Then there are introverts that are quarantined alone. And there are introverts that are quarantined with their family or roommates. And I think all four of those have different scenarios running. Like different people are going to respond or people are going to be experiencing things a little differently based on those scenarios. But I think the other thing that probably very much comes into this is whether or not you're a judger or a perceiver. Because I think judgers and perceivers going through those scenarios as well, judgers alone, judgers with families, perceivers alone, and perceivers with families, I think they're going to experience this a little differently as well. So I thought maybe we could have a little conversation around those, what is effectively a 4-quadrant model. And then also maybe throw in some elements about how different functions might be experiencing this, maybe some of the challenges people might be, kind of working through, maybe how certain types are affected. It's going to be more of a discovery conversation than it is going to be any sort of strong diagnostic with a strong prescription, because I've never experienced anything like this. It's not like I've coached people through this before. So I don't think that we have enough information under our belt to know definitively how people are going to respond, but I think we can do some pattern recognition and maybe talk a little bit about some of the feedback we've gotten from people of different types.
My heart goes out to all the FJs of the world right now, because FJs use a process of extroverted feeling to make their decisions. We've nicknamed it harmony. It's about getting needs met. It's about social connection, the social fabric of our lives. And in particular, NFJs, my heart goes out for ENFJs and INFJs. I can't imagine, if you're an ENFJ or INFJ listening right now, the amount of anxiety you're picking up from the world. The entire world right now is going through a tough time. And you already go through life picking up, almost like an antenna, every signal of anxiety, hostility, anxiousness, disruption, discord. It already comes to you very easily. You pick these things up. And right now, I can't imagine just the level of duress you might feel in your life, and then not being able to connect and share with other people. That harmony process connects, and it almost releases some of that through social connection. We have my ESFJ nephew, Dimitri, lives with us. He helps with the tutoring of our children and some of the other things at the company when we have live events and other stuff. And he's really struggling. His harmony process, extroverted feeling, is he's having a tough time because he's, first of all, he's an extrovert, but he's a social extrovert. He loves to go out and connect with people, be out and about. And it's a difficult experience for him to have to be stuck in a place with people he loves. Ostensibly, he loves us. But it's challenging because I can see him like every day getting more and more drained. It's like watching a battery drain on him every day, not being able to connect with people. And he does his best. He has some gaming buddies he plays video games with late at night. He has some friends he calls and tries to text with and connect with. But there's not that physical movement connection with a live person besides just us here in this house. And I'm watching it wear on him, and he's an ESFJ. I can't imagine if you throw in like that intuitive process of introverted intuition, how much that this must drain on you. So my heart goes out to you if you're an FJ. And I know other types struggle too. I'm not just saying that FJs struggle, but I feel it. I can kind of sense that this must be really tough for you right now. And hang in there, because I know this can be a challenge for your life, that there might be some things you can learn through this too as we go forward, because of all the learning you're going to have to do to get through this experience. Might be like wearing weights around your ankles as you train to run. And then when the world settles down again and we get to our new normal on the other side of all of this, it might actually it might be a benefit. There's an opportunity for you to be something that, like, learn something and grow in a way you never thought possible for yourself.
I think as we talk about people who are falling in those 4 quadrants, particularly with introversion and extroversion, in those 4 different scenarios, I think one thing that should be acknowledged is that you're talking about people who use extroverted feeling or harmony, and NFJs in particular. I think that it shouldn't be discounted how much anxiety and stress is in the collective unconscious right now. Like, I'm an ENTP and I'm feeling it. And I use extroverted feeling or harmony as my tertiary or 10-year-old function. So it's a loud enough frequency that even somebody like me who's not generally sensitive to those kinds of energies, I'm feeling it too and responding. And I think one of the challenges that, FJs, particularly NFJs, might have is that they're more aware of it more often, and so they're more tapped into those frequencies. But I think on some level everybody's feeling it. And when you don't have a connection or a relationship to how those things impact you, I think most people are just calling it depression or stress or a darkness. But I think most people are feeling that. And so it's not, it's kind of lighthearted to banter about, this profiling question, and we're either alone or surrounded by people. But I think that the extra layer of what's going on just in general with people. It's been a rough 5 years in the collective unconscious anyway, Like, our collective unconscious has already been under a lot of stress and anxiety, at least in my observation at my age. I'm 42. That's not super old, but it's old enough, I think, to be able, I've tasted 5 different decades. And it seems like there's something very unique about this last decade, particularly the last 5-6 years. And so it's already had sort of a darkness to the collective unconscious, but I think this has sort of kicked it up a notch. And the anxiety and stress that people feel about world events, it's almost like people were anticipating something terrible happening, and now we're in the thing. We're not just anticipating it, we're in the thing, and now there's just nothing but question marks. How many people are going to die? How bad is this going to get? Can we, quote unquote, flatten the line? Are we going to be, we're seeing images of bodies just laying out, to outside of hospitals, and now they're in ice trucks because there's so many of them next to certain hospitals. It's just really anxiety producing. And then, of course, this ripples out to everybody who's got who has a family member, a loved one who is currently dealing with this illness, or perhaps has died from it. You've got the sadness and the anguish around all of that. So, not to be a super big bummer or anything, but that can't, we have to sort of have that as a node in the system. The feelings in the collective unconscious are a node in the system as we're talking about how people are dealing with quarantine. Now, that might be a little woo-woo for you. You, the listener, you might not cut into ideas like things in the collective unconscious that we're all feeling. But even my most rational friends, even like the hardcore NTPs that I talk to and hang out with, there's like an idea of this frequency that's out there, this energy that's out there that it's hard to deny. And so I think we should keep that in mind as we're talking about these scenarios.
So if we jump back into that quadrant idea of extroverts isolated, extroverts with people, introverts isolated, or introverts with people, you're already probably identifying yourself along one of those places. Are you introvert or extrovert? And are you surrounded by people that you've got to be with every day, or are you by yourself? And just anecdotally, I've talked to a couple introverts, and they've been surprised at how this is challenging for them to be isolated. A couple isolated introverts that expressed to me they were surprised at how much this was not a glorious time that maybe they thought it would be. Like, I was just thinking of a friend right now who she was expressing like, I think I'm really starting to miss people. I think this is really wearing on me. It's only been a few weeks, and I think that is I think it's surprising to her, and I think it's surprising to me to hear that. I would think that introverts that are isolated would be able to go for a long period of time before it would start to wear on them because they have the connection, the digital connection. It's not like it's complete isolation. It's like there's some connection point here with other people that I was a little surprised about that. I wouldn't have expected that out of the gate.
That idea of the 7 days, though, is, I do think that people are going to have a more realistic answer to that because they've gone through it. And when you start pushing into week 2, week 3, week 4, we're way past 7 days now. You know what I mean? It's like we are humans still, after all, and we need other humans. No matter how introverted we are, we still need other humans. And then combine not just isolation with quarantine, combine that with social distancing, which means that even when you are around other human beings, like if you choose to go to the store, if you choose to go do things that are required, you need to be 6 feet away. Well, if the germs aren't getting to you, the other people's energy isn't going to get to you either. Like that's far enough away where you can't do any hugging or any touching. And I would say people, jumping to yet another model in love languages. If physical touch is your love language and you're not allowed to touch anybody for a time, that's got to be really disconcerting. So I think with introverts spending so much time alone and being unable to have that energetic interchange, even for the most hardcore introvert, it's got to wear on you, I would imagine. I think some introverts are doing fine. I think some of them are perfectly happy. I think it depends on your style of introversion, right? Because if you're an introvert, you're leading with one of 4 different cognitive functions: introverted thinking or accuracy, introverted feeling or authenticity, introverted intuition or perspectives, introverted sensing or memory. And I think that if you're leading with introverted intuition or introverted sensing, that means you're a judger. And I think judgers are having some struggle because it's throwing them out of their routines, and they're subsidizing that introverted function with an extroverted function, extroverted thinking or extroverted feeling. And those are about making things happen in the outside world. And you can only ignore those for so long before you feel incomplete. It's like you get our nutrient packs from our auxiliary or co-pilot function. And if we can't implement them often enough, we can feel ourselves lacking nutrients, metaphorically, obviously. And so I think if somebody is an introvert, like an IJ that's isolated at home, that might be particularly challenging unless they've figured out ways to implement that auxiliary or co-pilot function in their home. An ITJ might have a little bit more of a leg up here because they can start working on home projects, right? They can get busy and start doing things in their house, maybe start building systems or projects that they haven't done, that have been sitting there for a long time. They can maybe address them, or maybe even work from home. But an IFJ might have a bit more struggle if there's nobody that they're in quarantine with, because it's really hard to reach out. So I think in those kinds of situations, it becomes even more important to make sure you're connecting with people. Anybody who has extroverted feeling or harmony needs to make sure that they are regularly connecting with people during this time period. And so I think that's when like virtual happy hours become really important. So I even if you're an introvert that likes being alone for long stretches of time anyway, I don't think that this is a time period that they're all partying by themselves, right? Like they don't all have cone hats on and are blowing noisemakers because they're finally alone for as long as they want to be. I think if this is you, the listener, then I think it's understandable to have this be a trying time, a challenge that you still have to manage your energies around.
I think if you go look at the IPs, people that lead with introverted feeling or introverted thinking, the FPs or the TPs, also introverts, it's not so much about routine, it's about the ability to go and iterate, in the outer world or have freedom of motion or freedom to pivot quickly. You talk about judges might, all judges might feel like their routine has been crippled. I feel like I'm living in nothing but routine. Like I feel like this is like the same Groundhog Day over and over again. For perceivers, I think it feels that way. It feels like we're living the same routine over and over, being isolated by our, in this quarantine situation. And so I think for IPs, it is a little different challenge if they're isolated, and in that there's not a freedom to go, like when the mood strikes you, to go connect with somebody that maybe you don't do all the time. You might go a while as an introvert perceiver, but all of a sudden you're like, I got to go connect with somebody, and you don't have the option. Your options have been removed from you. That's got to be challenging as well.
I know some ISPs that are refusing to quarantine themselves. They just won't do it. They value the freedom of motion too much. And I'm trying to think if I know some INPs that are doing the same. But I think, that's the challenge for introverts that are perceivers. If they're quarantined by themselves, that's just, there's a restlessness that they've got to be feeling, this desire to go do stuff. So I think if you're an introvert that is quarantined and isolated by yourself, there's a couple leverage points. Number one, being aware of that restlessness is important. Being aware of the energy that you're experiencing and managing it through things like walks. I mean, I know that there are some cities around the globe that are like just shut down. Like if you're out and about and you don't have a valid reason why you're out and about, they'll fine you. And I'm sorry for people in that situation. It's got to be horrific. Most of the globe is not under that burden, though. Most of the world, there's just a few cities that are like that. And if you're in one of the places that don't have to justify every time you leave your house, then the strong recommendation is you go for walks. You get out in nature. There's a thing called forest bathing where you get out in nature and you basically you feel the energy of nature around you. And we're very fortunate in the Northern Hemisphere to be entering spring when this is hitting. And so getting out in the sun, especially on like increasingly warm, sunny days, I think it's crucial to give yourself permission to do that. So walks and any energy work you might be familiar with. I have a friend who does Qigong. That might not be your thing, but we do meditation. You and I, Joel, we do meditations every day. I do a chakra meditation. I know it sounds woo to you other NTs out there, but it's actually really good and it makes me feel good at the end of it. So I do it every day and you do an energy platform every day. And these are just things we're trying to, we're trying to manage our energies because we have question marks when this is all going to be over. Like that's maybe the thing that creates the biggest feeling of a lion in a cage, right? Just pacing back and forth is we don't know when the cage is going to open. So managing your energy and just being present, being with the situation, I think that's really crucial.
If you're an extrovert that's isolated, you've probably already attempted the get outside walk, even if you're in a city that doesn't allow you potentially. And it's got to be tough, man. Like as an extrovert myself, I cannot imagine being by myself with an indefinite timeline of, you may not be outside or be able to go do anything or connect with anybody for fill in the date at some future date, possibly, maybe not ever, like question mark. It's like the most destabilizing thing ever in the world. So that can be really challenging for people that need to connect with others and be out and about or just connect with the outer world. And I think the same recommendations can apply, go outside, be in the environment as much as possible. But like I talked about Dimitri, ESFJ, he's around us, he's connecting with people he loves and he can connect with his friends online, but he really needs just driving to the store and buying something in the store and connecting with the checkout person. Like that alone could be a hit for him. And he doesn't get that right now. And I can see him just getting drained every day. Little things like that are gone. And things you probably don't even remember that you needed or realized you needed as an extrovert. Like, oh yeah, I guess even days when I didn't think I connected with anybody, I was actually connecting with people in very micro ways, small ways, and those are gone now, and I'm feeling the weight of that. And I think that hits all of us extroverts in a powerful, overwhelming, feeling. It's like I feel it too.
Yeah, it's almost like you can't articulate it. It's a lot. I think of anybody in any quadrant here, it's the extroverts that are quarantined alone that I feel the worst for. And just like with introverts, there's 4 different kinds of extroversion. And if you're an extrovert, you're leading with either extroverted feeling, harmony, extroverted thinking, effectiveness, extroverted sensing, sensation, extroverted intuition, or exploration. And the extroverts that lead with extroverted feeling are the ones that I feel the worst for because you need a variety of human connection and interaction. Oh, I can't even imagine. I feel so bad. I think the next one coming down the list, though, is probably extroverted intuition. Actually, us. I would feel the worst for us if we were alone, or for myself if I was totally alone, because we need variety and novelty and freedom of movement to be able to go experience something that's out of the norm. And I tell this to INPs all the time, and they always scoff at me. But I say you can't develop your co-pilot or auxiliary function of extroverted intuition online. Like just reading new content and thinking new theories or whatever, exploring things online, that is never going to replace actual true extroverted intuition. And I know that because I'm going crazy right now with not being able to get novelty outside the house. I can't do it with online stuff. So that's not, I mean, like you there's such a limitation to my process, my function, that it's, I mean, I'm quarantined with 5 people or 4 other people besides myself, and I'm going a little crazy. I can't imagine being alone. But our friend Beatrice Chestnut, she's an ENFP, and she's quarantined by herself. She's isolated, and Beatrice said that right now she's just getting to work. She said she's doing a lot of virtual happy hours with friends, and she's just getting to work. And
she's writing her new Enneagram book, right?
That's right. She's writing a new Enneagram book. Are we supposed to be telling people that?
Oh, shoot. Well, I just did.
Okay. Well,
sorry, Beatrice.
Anyway, or whatever she's working on, whatever project that we may or may not be familiar with is happening. And I think that that's pretty much what you and I have decided to do, too, is get to work. Like, we're just nailing ourselves to our desks. And we're working on projects that have been kind of languishing for a long time, things that we should have done for a long time, but we never, quote unquote, had the time. So we're focused on that. And I can imagine that that's probably the leverage point for those of you who are extroverts that are just going crazy.
Yeah, we've been wanting to redo all of our personality hacker starter kits, personal development starter kits. And it's been a huge project that we keep going, oh, let's do live events. Let's do this. Let's do that. And we keep pushing it, back and back. And now we're like, we're going to have to tackle this year, like starting now. And we're actually in the middle of doing it. So keep your eye out because you're going to have some new content. If you're one of our starter kit members, you're going to get a new starter kit very soon for your personality type, hopefully.
Yeah, we're almost done with INTP and we're very excited about it. Anyway, that said, I think that that's a challenge. But any extroverted sensation, you ESPs out there, you probably are going crazy because you're used to getting out and doing fun stuff. Man, if you're trapped in an apartment in a city somewhere, maybe I feel worse for you than I would for myself. So getting out, taking walks, doing physical things, meditating, keeping track of your energies, those are all leverage points. But I will make a note before we go to people who are quarantined with others. I do want to make a little note about one of the things that you can be using this time for. Nature, by way of a horrifying virus that is incredibly communicable, has forced us as a species for a time to slow down. And particularly in, westernized countries where we have any distraction we want at any given time. No matter where we're at, we have a distraction ready-made, along with a lifestyle that goes blindingly fast. And one of the things that's happened is as a collective, we have had to put the brakes on. We've had to slow down and look at our lives in a different way. For example, I don't cook much. I'm just not much of a cook. I cook a couple meals a week. Most of the time we run out and get food, or we figure out some alternative, or we do something quick. But we're in a situation where we can't really do that anymore. Like, I can't just run out and get food that day to cook and prepare, and I can't just hit fast food or quick food, rather, whenever I want to. Like, I've actually had to become a meal planner. I've had to think, well, there were times when I ordered meat and we weren't able to get meat. There were times when we ordered, vegetables or fruits and we weren't able to get them. And so I've had to become a lot more of a planner around how I'm going to make the food that we do have go further. And so I'm cooking every night. I'm like cooking meals with the thought of how do I make sure that all of this food, how do I make sure that we get all the nutrients we need in our diets, and then how do I make this food last? It's a very, very different way of going about things for me. But I'm picking up a new skill, and I'm really grateful for that, actually. I'm grateful that the slowdown is forcing me to think in a different way. And I think when we don't have as many distractions, what ends up happening is we have to sit with the life we've built for ourselves. We have to sit with all of the decisions that we have been making, maybe too quickly, maybe unconsciously, maybe on autopilot. And I think that if you are quarantined by yourself, one of the things that might be happening is things might be surfacing for you. Things like insecurities or feelings of inadequacy or feelings of, old traumas coming up. or things that you've been really successful at pushing away and not wanting to see because you just built a lifestyle of distraction around you, which is almost 100% of us, actually. Almost 100% of people that I know, including myself, build a life of distraction to avoid having to look at the really dark parts of who we are. And the thing that has been mostly robbed from us is ongoing perpetual conveyor belt distraction. Now, you can still do it with video games if you have a console or a PC. You can do it with, you can do it with Netflix. You can do it with whatever you want to distract yourself with. But I think like all of us get to a law of diminishing returns on that kind of entertainment. We get to a point where we binge 2 shows back to back and we're kind of done binging shows. Or we've been playing a video game maybe 50 hours and we beat the game and it's like, man, I just do not want to pick up a controller again. Like we get to a place where before we were trying to shove that stuff into our discretionary time. But when we have all of this discretionary time, that's when things start to really emerge and surface. And this might be one of the best opportunities you've had in a long time to address some of that stuff. That's effectively what Vipassana retreats are. They're 10 days of quiet isolation and meditation to allow all that stuff to come up for your ego. And this is like an enforced Vipassana retreat from nature to us. So you can choose, of course, you can use this time however you choose to do so. Again, there's a lot of anxiety in the collective unconscious. That is a node in the system that has to be acknowledged and addressed. And also, if stuff is coming up for you, this may be a gift. It might be a time period where you can really tackle some of that stuff. Really sit with it. Really ask yourself the direction of your life. Look at your life as you have constructed it to now. And find out what maybe the leverage points of change are. Maybe take this time to bathe in yourself. Fall in love with who you are. Figure out all the reasons why you don't love yourself and navigate around them and meditate on it. This could be a really powerful opportunity.
As a little kid, I used to do this thought exercise where I was the last person on the planet, the very last person that existed. And I thought to myself, well, what would I do? I'd go to the banks and take all the money out of the banks. I'd have millions of dollars, if I could just go and get all the money out of stores and banks, and I could have all the cars and all the possessions I would want. I could do any activity I wanted as long as it didn't require other people to have to do it. And I started to realize, man, it's a really, all those things that we pursue all the time. I'm talking about really little kids. I was thinking really, I could have all the candy I want, all the money I want, very simple ways. And also, as an adult, we tend to not really outgrow that. We just get more sophisticated at what those toys and candies and monies are, right? It's like whatever stories we create for it. And it's really interesting to kind of almost simulate this for ourselves. If you're isolated by yourself, in a way, you are in the midst of a thought exercise of I'm the last person on the planet. Now, you still have digital connection, phone, internet, other things like this with other people. So it's not as severe as actually being the last person on the planet. And this is an opportunity, like Antonia is talking about, to sit and think about, and I'm doing this too, and I'm isolated with other people, but get my priorities in line. What is it that I'm doing here? Why do I go to that job every day? Why do I hang out with those friends? Why do I pursue these things? Why do I want those possessions over there or that achievement over here? What does that actually mean to me? Because, a lot of us are in, maybe not survival, but we're definitely in safety and security. We're definitely trying to ensure that we're safe, we're secure, we can get the supplies we need. I mean, who thought that toilet paper was going to be an adventure to try to solve something, this massive problem? How do we get toilet paper? We were talking about this today. We're getting short on toilet paper, and we're like, okay, how are we going to get toilet paper for our household? And these are challenges, just basic needs that we're challenged with that we haven't really had to be challenged with. Most of us in the Western societies, especially, haven't had to be challenged with basic need level things on a day-to-day basis. And so for me, it's getting my mind and my heart really clear on what matters, what is actually important. And once those basic needs are met, a lot of the other stuff that I would worry or be anxious around, I'm realizing, wow, man, Joel, you've got to seriously reevaluate some of those things. Really sit down and think, why did you get stressed about that over there? like that stupid thing you were worried about. Like, what in the world, man? And it's focusing me to start to think about those things. So I think if you are isolated, it's not going to be fun. It's going to be a challenge. It sucks, quite frankly. Like it's really a horrible situation in some ways. And there are probably opportunities to sit and to look at your life and just look at the things that are important to you and reevaluate. And if they're still important to you, that's cool too. But what an amazing opportunity. What an amazing gift you've been given. And it's hard to see it as a gift sometimes. Like it might take a lot of work. And even that might be a gift. Like the ability to amalgamate something that's difficult, that's challenging into an opportunity or a gift. That talent is a gift as well. Like there's so much opportunity here in front of us. And it might not be as obvious at first, but I think the longer we're in this situation, the more that opportunity is still there for us. And I think that's where I'm focusing my attention on personally.
Definitely. I mean, there's been some ahas that have surfaced just in like realizing how we deal with our finances. Like we're not savers. Like you and I we're people who we love life and we enjoy it and we want to go do stuff. And all of a sudden we're in a situation where we're like, oh, there might be some serious financial crunch happening here. And I know that I'm sure a lot of people listening are probably very concerned about the financial situation that they're either in right this second or will be in once this is all complete, because this is a two shot, right? The first wave of this is the virus itself and dealing with survival, like Maslow's survival. We've all kind of collectively been shoved down there in the sense of having to worry about our physical health. And then the next place will be, if we're quarantining ourselves and we're being very vigilant about that, we may never have to think about the survival level. But as you mentioned, we'll be in safety and security. And if not right this second, then absolutely with the condition that the economy will be in after this. And so there's a lot here. And you and I are like, maybe we should deal with our finances differently than we have before. So we're getting a lot of ahas about just things about that we've been in a position in the West, particularly. I mean, I can't speak for people in other cultures because I don't live in those cultures, but I know that in the West, we have a tendency to be a bit self-indulgent, and we've taken on those characteristics ourselves as well. And I'm reevaluating that. Like a couple of days ago, because we're trying to save our plastic bags as much as possible in our baggies, because first of all, we don't know if the supply chains will be interrupted and we won't have baggies, but we try to be conscientious about it anyway because it's plastic, and we ran out of some and we couldn't get any more, and so anyway, you put onions in an old bagel bag. My grandmother used to put onions in old like bread bags. And I realized, oh, this is how it starts. Like, we're becoming the old people that I remember by putting, like, vegetables in bread bags. You know what I mean? It's like, this is how the conservation starts. Like, the old people who, made it through the Great Depression and World War II and all sorts of terrible things, they just saved everything. And I'm like, oh, we're going to be those people now. We're going to be the people who put onions in bagel bags for the rest of our lives, probably. So it's just like a new way of looking at things, and maybe a way that almost like a wake-up call. Like societally, it's a wake-up call potentially if we're smart enough to learn the right lessons. And individually, it can be a wake-up call, again, if we're smart enough to learn the right lessons. So yeah, I think this time period is a good reevaluation time period.
All right, let's talk about another nightmare, being stuck with people. If you're alone or if you're an introvert or an extrovert, not alone because you're going to be with people, but you're trapped with others, what do? How's this nightmare going to work for you?
Oh, okay. So we're the extroverts that are trapped with people.
This is more of a nightmare for you than it is for me, I think.
I have learned some leverage points. I have. I think introverts that are trapped with people, they come. I know we're talking about extroverts trapped with people, but introverts trapped with people are my number 2 of the four worst positions you can be in this quadrant. I think introverts trapped with people are the second worst, and then we're number 3, extroverts trapped with people. Because here's the challenge with being an extrovert trapped with people: it's the same people, like, and you're in a small confined space. Like, even if you live in a very large house, it's still a confined space. And so being around the same people, like day in and day out with no variety, no extrovert is cool with that. Part of being an extrovert is needing variety of humans.
I think you and Dimitri are having a harder time with this, though. Both of you have extroverted feeling, harmony in your cognitive functions, and this is tougher for both of you than it is for me.
Well, and we both have extroverted intuition or exploration. He's an ESFJ, so his quote-unquote loop is extroverted feeling, extroverted intuition. And my loop is extroverted intuition, extroverted feeling. So on some level, both of us need variety of people, right? And we just go in reverse order of how that loop works. So it's not the same loop, but it's close enough. It's like a mirror version of it that both of us are we're having a hard time. And we're supposed to be the people who help bring morale up. That has come to you, though. As the ENFP, everybody in the family is leaning hard on you to keep morale going. So you have to be sort of the performer and the good mood that like holds everybody's emotions.
It's wearing on me, though.
Yeah, I know. Like
physically. I'm like, as soon as we're done with this podcast, I'm going to go lay down.
I know. You're doing a good job. But the extroverts that have to be around the same people in a confined space. Okay, and then add a component of children on top of it.
Kids do not, I mean, I think they realize what's going on, but their needs are still there, man. Like, it is amazing to me how I'm like, guys, do you not see that we're in the middle of like trying to figure out how to get toilet paper online right now? Like, it's a little stressful. We're trying to do something, but I need this. It's like, guys, do you want to wipe your butts later? Like, can you give me some space, please?
We got to make money so we can get the black market overpriced toilet paper so you can wipe your butts. Well, it's not quite that severe. It's not quite that severe.
No, it's not that bad yet.
No, it isn't.
That's why I'm stressed. I don't want it to get like that.
Yeah, exactly. We're hustling here, okay? We're trying to do the thing we need to do. So, yeah, it's a challenge. Well, then on top of that, it depends, I think, on the age of your child. Like, we were talking to another friend of ours who has a teenage son who was like, he's over 18, but he still lives at home, and he's like, I'm leaving. Like, I gotta go. I can't be in here. And they're like trying to convince him to stay at home. And he's like, no, I gotta get out of here. So then he left. And that would be so scary. It would be super scary. And it's like, well, then do you invite them back? And how do you quarantine them? And I mean, I don't even want to think about any of that. We deal with children who are 7 and 13 at the time of this recording. And so a lot of what we're dealing with is, still having those needs that have to go, that they want met, needs that are more understandable in a normal time period. But I think the other side of this is also the anxiety they're feeling because they don't understand. And so you have to sort of balance their anxiety as well. And then you have to not blast your anxiety onto them because they're kids, right? And they don't deserve it. And you're feeling all this way. And you got to keep the dynamic positive because it's not like if you get really pissed off, you can just go for, you can just leave or take the family out for roller skating or something to get us all back in simpatico. Like, there's just so many limitations here. And so I think when you are an extrovert trapped with a bunch of people, it's no walk in the park. It's not enough variety. It's not really enough activity or action either. Not every extroverted type is extroverted in a social way. Like we talked about the 4 different kinds of extroversion, those 4 different cognitive functions. Some of them don't have to have people involved at all, but you still have to be able to do stuff. You have to be out engaged in the environment. You have to be able to have freedom of motion. You have to be able to build things and have projects going. And if you're like in a tiny little apartment, stuck someplace in a city, that's very difficult. We are very fortunate that we live in the country. And so even though we don't live in an area that has like lots of trails around or anything, we have been discovering new places because we've never really gone on this many hikes in our area before. And so we are discovering new places in around our home, but I don't know what I'd do if I couldn't go for a walk. I mean, that's like saving our bacon quite a bit. So I guess this is more just sympathy, but I think some of the things that I've discovered is the magic of earbuds. I've been using that a lot. I've also been getting up very early in the morning to ensure that I have solid alone time. So I get up probably at least an hour, if not more, earlier than everybody else. And that's crucial alone time. And I'm not spending that time productively. Like I'm playing some stupid app game, right, with listening to, old music. But that's what I have to do in order to be able to survive, being quarantined with a bunch of other people. And we all have been doing meditations. I've been doing meditations with the kids. We've been trying to do yoga as well. If we can get everybody sort of involved and engaged in doing the same kind of energy management activity. We've been working through some of our issues because we are also sort of trapped and our issues are surfacing. So we've been dealing with some of our issues, which is good. And we've not been as strict about things like video games. Like we get it. And what's nice is our kids are started out cyber schooled anyway. So we try to stay to routine, help them out with their schooling. And we've been a little bit more lax on things like video games, where before we'd tell them that there's a limitation, but right now they can't go do anything else. So I think you also have to be a little flexible in how all of this pans out.
I think there's an opportunity here, if you're trapped with your family, to reconnect with each other. I think we live in our modern society such separate lives. Mom and dad are doing their thing, kids are doing their thing. We all go to our rooms or our own individual devices. We all have our own activity schedules, sports and karates and work and social groups. And we're all forced back to the family level at this point. If you look at the Graves model, spiral dynamics, this is a very Graves 2 tribal time where we're back in the family unit. And that's really all we have right now. Almost like we're back in caveman times. You and your family are in the cave and you're hunting and gathering together. And there's an opportunity, again, looking for the opportunities here to reconnect with the people that you're closest with, your family. Now, you may not be excited about that idea, but if there's an opportunity for you to reconnect with them, this might be the chance you have for that. Family dinners, as an example. Antonia's talking about cooking more and more. We're also eating together around the table together every night. And there's a different dynamic that's emerged as we share the things that have gone in our day, some of the concerns the kids have, some of the concerns we have, and some of the things we want to communicate to them. There's a sense of like, hey, we're in this together and we love each other. And yeah, there's actually been an escalate in tensions and some battles and some arguments and some fights with all of us because we're so constricted. All this energy is just trapped. But again, like Antonia said, there's like issues surfacing. So there's an opportunity here to learn how to navigate, maybe have some of those crucial conversations that haven't been had until now. And I think that, going back to the family unit, there's a benefit potentially in that. There's an opportunity here for families to reconnect when there's not all this distraction in the outer world, all these things that have grabbed their attention and pulled us in all these different directions. And we just basically see each other in the morning and at night very briefly. Now we're stuck together a lot. And it can be challenging for working parents. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we work from home and it's a challenge even before the coronavirus because our kids are educated at home. So we've had to, luckily, we've put a lot of the things in place that we're utilizing now during the coronavirus situation, the quarantining, because we were building a lifestyle to give us some flexibility to do what we do for a living. And it's even a heightened challenge in that. Even those systems and things we put in place are also being strained because, the kids were in karate. They were going and doing activities off site. We were doing stuff other places, and none of that's happening at all right now. So it's been a challenge. And I'm learning to really be present in this and to say, okay, what's the opportunity here? What will my children remember from this time period? These few weeks or months or however long this is going to take? Are they going to look back in their 60s and 70s and remember, wow, that was a horrible time period. Our family was trapped. We were fighting. Mom and dad were upset. It was the worst time of my life. Or are they going to look back at it and go, I kind of missed that. I loved being around my family, connecting, having more social time with the people that are my family unit. And it was a really special time. It was a short time. It didn't last. We went back to our normal routines afterward. But wow, that was a really special, intimate experience. And I got closer to my parents and my siblings and the people in my life. So think about that. What will the experience be talked about years from now if you reflect back on it? And is there a way we can build an experience for our families that is memorable, that they're remembering it in a positive way that was building us up rather than tearing us down? And I think that's where I keep looking at the opportunities. Okay, what can I do So we're trying to, like, right now we're watching a show with my son every night at the same time. We hadn't been doing that before. We were all going our separate ways, but now we're making an appointment to do that. I make an appointment with my daughter to play a game with her every couple of days. And we're trying to find ways to connect on a more regular basis. And I want some of this stuff to continue after this is over. Like, I really am learning that there's an importance here. And we've been I always thought, well, I'll do that someday. I'll do that in the future. When I get more time, I'll take the time to watch that show with my son or play that game with my daughter. And now I'm going, well, wait a minute. This is being forced upon me, and I want to keep this going now. The someday is now, not in the future. And this is forcing me to be very present around it in this moment.
Yeah, like the universe just dropped time on a table in front of us.
Yeah.
So we have to take advantage of it. As you were talking about having those crucial conversations, I think one thing to keep your finger on the pulse of is I read a tweet where somebody said that there's going to be a bunch of divorces after this quarantine is over. And they were being tongue-in-cheek a little bit, or at least sarcastic about it. But they're probably not wrong. That probably is happening. In fact, this is probably kind of like a supremely miserable time for certain people. There might be an escalation in like domestic violence right now. There
absolutely is.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's not okay, and that's kind of horrifying, and my heart shatters for anybody in that situation. By the same token, part of the reason why that some of that might be happening, and if you're in a situation right now where you maybe are reevaluating your relationship with your spouse because of this time period, there's a distinction between problems that have been needing to be addressed and haven't, because we've allowed life to be distracting enough to just not think about it or to push it away or kick the can down the road. And the kind of stress that comes from getting that energy sort of pumped into us from the collective unconscious. And the distinction between those two things is really important. Like, it's important to know that is this relationship, or is the reason why we're fighting all the time strained because we have a bunch of unresolved issues and this is a time to address them, even if it means the relationship is complete and we've just been putting that off. Is that what's going on here? Or are we in a heightened state of stress and anxiety? Are we experiencing all of this ourselves and maybe even slurping it up from other people? And that's actually what's going on. So if that's something that's a challenge for you, if that's something that's going on, there are ways to create those distinctions. Like part of what I do is when I can feel myself there's been a couple times through this thing that I've just exploded. Like I'm beyond, right? Like I cannot control myself. Most of the time I have these mechanisms I've created in my mind that when something like that happens, I immediately start looking for the source code. What's the belief? Like, what is the emotion attached to? Which belief is the emotion attached to? And what's the source code of that belief, and what's going on underneath there, and how do I reevaluate it? And there's been a couple times where I can't get to the source code. Like, I just can't find it. And I realize it's because this one's not mine. Like, this one isn't mine. I'm exploding in behalf of other people. The emotion I'm feeling is me with my little 10-year-old tertiary extroverted feeling or harmony, being overwhelmed by the emotions of other people. And even though I'm not physically around them necessarily, or maybe I am, maybe I'm experiencing the emotions of the house. But it's so much that I don't have a lot of mechanisms to control it built yet. I'm trying to build them now because of necessity. But because they're other people's, if I wasn't trying to be sensitive to that, I would be able to create some very convincing narratives and stories that this was happening to me from the people I love. Like that would create bad dynamics between maybe me and you, Joel, or me and Dimitri, or me and the kids. So that's one thing I just wanted to kind of mention is like there's a distinction between those two things, and it's really bad to conflate them. So do what you can to separate them out and ensure that if you are feeling those feelings, they're because the relationship needs work and maybe a crucial conversation or two versus just the anxiety of the world that's causing some of these stories and narratives to justify the feelings that are actually coming from without. Let's
move on to the last quadrant. If you're an introvert stuck with other people, oh my goodness.
I know. You're in the second worst position of all of them.
Do you have any hair left? Like, have you? Are you in sackcloth and ashes at this point?
We were talking to an INTJ friend who has a toddler, and she's trapped with her family and a toddler, which I didn't address. We were talking about kids 7 years all the way up to 19, but I didn't talk about a toddler. And she mentioned that normally she relies on all these systems outside the home to be able to catch her breath, right? To take a break. And she can't have those anymore. So now she's an introvert that's got this toddler that is constantly seeking attention. Whew, that's got to be tough. But if you are an introvert and you are being quarantined with family or maybe roommates or other people, that you probably are doing even more of the survival techniques that I was talking about that I have to do, which is doing what you can to carve out the alone time that you have to have. And I think that introverts get good at this, though. I think the reason why I've put introverts that are quarantined with people in the second worst category is I think introverts have to do this as part of their sort of survival guide in general, right? Like throughout life. Introverts have to find ways to steal alone time. And it's extroverts that don't put as much time and energy into it because the world's a little more accommodating to us. So an extrovert that's stuck at home alone is a far less common situation to have already built skill around than an introvert that's surrounded by people. And yet that's got to be tough. And especially if you have little kids, and those little kids are very demanding of attention, and you can't just go use all the systems you're used to. Like, again, if you're an IJ, you probably are very much used to using systems. For IPs, you're used to, just spontaneously taking the kids out and doing something fun and let's go do this thing now. But either way, your options have been removed from you. And so now you've got to be home with these kids and figure out some sort of programming, right? Or even if it's not kids, even if it's like other adults, you've got to figure out ways to keep everybody sort of occupied and interested in something other than you all the time. And if you're an introvert that's stuck with extroverts in quarantine, you might have even more of a difficult time because they're looking for people to talk to. Although the fact that you're the same person over and over might be wearing on them as well.
One thing as you're talking about introverts being around other people, this probably applies to introverts, extroverts. I don't know who it applies to, but I bet you a lot of people get their introvert time on their morning and evening commutes to and from work. They don't even realize that's when they're getting alone time. I mean, you might realize it, but I was just thinking about like a lot of extroverts, like, I don't need that much alone time. And they get probably more than they realize each day because they have things like a commute and have their headphones in and they're reading or something. They don't even realize the amount of introversion they're getting. And when it's taken away from you, now you're like, wow, I really am overwhelmed by all these people all the time. Even extroverts might feel that way. And I'm sure introverts are more aware of it. So I can't even imagine just the amount of introvert time removed from something as simple as a commute each day or going to lunch by yourself on your lunch break at work or something that you might have just casually built into your life without even knowing it. And now you're like, wow, that was really important. I didn't even know going to lunch, each day was important by myself. But boy, that was a big leverage point for me. And I bet we're going to have a lot of realizations around that also as things we kind of start to realize. So I want to talk a few more comments here to land the plane. Let's wrap up this conversation. It's been a very free-form conversation talking a little bit about introvert extroversion and being stuck with people or by yourself in a quarantine situation. And we want to hear from you. So start thinking about some of the things that you've been doing in your life, and I'll comment on that in a moment here. But I think in general, this is a tough time for everybody. And one of the things I keep reminding myself is that grace goes a long way for myself and for the people around me and the world at large. So very localized myself. If I got a little snippy with Antonia yesterday, I got to go, you know what? I can't beat myself up about that. I got to have some grace, make it right, apologize if that's needed, deal with the issue, whatever it is, but say to myself, there's a lot of pressure on me personally, on our family, and on the world, and I have to show grace for myself. And then the people around me, when my kids are acting up, or maybe there's some tension between myself and Antonia, or there's tension in the house, I need to show grace to the people around me because I'm not the only one experiencing trauma and tension, right? The people in my life are feeling similar things. Like we're all in this together. There's a lot of tension right now. So there's this idea of grace in my faith background of just extending patience, goodwill, and understanding, even before it's requested, just like a blank check of those things. Any exception to this, if it's abusive or anything like that, obviously I'm not talking about those situations. I'm talking about normal levels of health and normal levels of wanting things to work out okay. There's a way to extend grace to people in our lives, and I think that's really important. And then I think also the world at large. There is so much media flying around everywhere, so much blame, so much hostility. There's so many rumors of things, of this and that, and like it could be really easy to get angry with political factions or social groups, and maybe rightly so. There's probably some justification for that. But right now, while the crisis is happening, while you're in quarantine, there's really not much you can do about it anyway. For your own sake, there's an opportunity for you to extend grace at this moment for your own mental health and your own emotional health. Extending grace isn't just for the other person. In fact, I would argue it's more for you than it is for the other person. Extending grace allows you to let it go, allows you not to hold on so tight and to feel like this is the most important thing in the world and you've got to grip it so tightly that it's causing so much distress in yourself, you can't even function. Your anxiety just goes up even more. So I think that's also giving yourself grace, is by extending it to others, it comes back to you in a way. It's releasing that energy. It lets go of that, and it just doesn't feel as intense. Speaking of media, by the way, there is isolation happening. We are by ourselves, at least in family units or small, roommate unit situations, or maybe completely by ourselves. And one of the ways that we as humans find a digital connection is by reading the news and seeking out what's happening in the outer world. This is a way for us to simulate connection with other people. And what do you read in the news and in the media right now? Nothing but negativity, trauma. Like there's so much coming at us. So there's really this double-edged sword of, man, I feel like I need to connect with what's happening in the world out there and what people are doing because I can't physically connect. So you go to online news sources and then you just get a garbage truck dump full of negativity or anxiety dumped into your lap.
Yeah, if it bleeds, it leads.
Absolutely. And so this is a really difficult tension point to strike, because I find myself doing this too. Like, I want to sit here and say, I've cut out all news from my diet, my take-in diet. I don't read news articles. I don't get on, but I'm finding myself, because I already started to go down that road in the last year or two, just because of the social and political climate. It's just like, it was too much. I'm like, this is causing me to be unhappy. But man, it's hard to cut this off. I want to know what's going on in the world. I'm an extrovert especially. I want to know, what are other people up to? What's happening? What do I need to know? What will be important for my survival? And then I get on these news sources, and I can tell when I get off of reading some news articles, because it's just one article after another, feeding a steady diet of this stuff. And I kind of feel icky. I feel bad. I feel low. It's really tough to manage.
Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between staying informed and just getting kind of masturbatory about it.
Yeah.
Obviously you want to stay informed to the point where you'll know when the quarantine is over, right?
Yeah.
Like, we'll want to know what is going on in news cycles, but I don't think that's what you're talking about.
Well, and it's a struggle. I can't just get bare minimum right now, because it's almost, quite frankly, it's something interesting happening in the world too. Like, part of it is like, our lives in the world are, what is it? We all live lives of quite desperation. And this is something pretty epic and big. It's global. It's interesting. It feels dramatic. And it feels like there's a draw to it. There's a drama that I hunger for, that's really interesting in some ways.
And yet it's a curse. May you live in interesting times.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So this is a balance that I think we can all manage better. And I think if you're struggling with some emotional mental health, just like with your body, physical health, if you struggle with physical health, well, check to see what you're feeding your body with. That's an indicator of how you're going to feel. If you drink a lot of alcohol, you're going to feel like crap. If you put a bunch of garbage sugars and, carbs and like processed foods into your body, you're going to feel bad physically. Well, the same thing happens with your mind and your heart. What you feed yourself, and it's like, yeah, Joel, I know that, duh. It's like, but do we know that? Are we actually thinking that way? Because we don't always practice what we preach. And I'm talking to myself right now too.
Well, it's really tough right now because we're also trying to stay connected to other people during isolation and social distancing. And a lot of that stuff takes a side door through Facebook and Twitter and all of the different types of social media. So in order to stay connected with other people, you're also getting barraged with a lot of sort of reposts and retweets and all that stuff about all this news. So it's a fine line to walk. It's hard to do, staying connected digitally and virtually with people while at the same time not allowing that news cycle, that if it bleeds, it leads news cycle, to create a cord inside of you where it's just dumping all of its toxins in you. And being able to detether yourself from all of that so that, like you mentioned, you can feed your mind with the good stuff and not with the bad stuff.
So this leads me to my final point here as we wrap up, is I'd like to challenge you listening to do what I'm calling micro gratitude expressions. Are there ways that you can demonstrate, not articulate? I mean, it will come through articulation. You'll have to write something or say something or record something. But don't get on camera and be like, hey, we all need to be more grateful. Actually demonstrate. Just demonstrate without any explanation things that you're grateful for. So I've been trying to do this on Twitter right now as an example. I was standing in the shower the other day and I was realizing that I'm standing in a warm manufactured waterfall in my house, in a temperature-controlled house that someone at some point invented. You know, people put effort into inventing this technology that I benefit from, a hot water heater that produces water that spills over me. I get a hot shower. I can clean myself in warmth any time of the day I want. Now, not everybody has access to this, right? I'm blessed and I'm privileged to have access to a shower every day if I want one. And not everyone has access to this, but I am grateful for this privilege and this blessing in my life. And so I'm looking for ways to go, wow, that is an amazing technology that I benefit from. And I'm trying to focus my life on the little things that I'm grateful for. I was grateful for a mirror the other day. I can see myself, how I present to the world, and even for hygienic reasons. Is there something in my teeth or on my face or on my body that I can take care of? There are all sorts of things in our lives that aren't big things. They're very simple things. Are there ways that you, and I'd like to challenge you to do this, can find continually things to be grateful for and just start to express that? Express it publicly to people in your life, on social media or other places. It will do two things. One, it will train you to be looking for things to be grateful for in your life, very small micro things. And number two, it will start to change the narrative of the information feed that people are getting from others. And you don't need to be preachy about it. You don't need to say, you should do this too. Just express it. Just say, hey, today, I'm grateful for this. And just write it out, what you're grateful for today. Something small. It could be really quick. You don't have to do it every day when it comes to you. But training yourself to do this and expressing that, this could go a long way. And it could be a virus, a different kind of virus, a gratitude virus, a micro gratitude virus that spreads to other people that I believe will really help brighten someone's day and help reframe them to go, I'm kind of grateful for that same thing too. That's really a powerful thing in my life. You're right. I like that.
One of the things you implemented for us as a family, which I thought was brilliant, is we do something called Caught in the Act, which is during dinner, once we complete dinner, Joel goes through everybody in the family and says, did anybody catch anybody in the act? And it's intended to catch people doing the right thing or good things. And we've told the kids that they have to at least find one good thing about each other, and then if they have extras, they can talk about the gratitude they have for other people as well. And so it's trained us all to go through and talk about what we're grateful for each other for during this time period, which I think has been a leverage point, honestly. The second thing I was thinking of is, we talked about the collective unconscious and that being a node in the system. And I remember an energy worker one time saying that one person can actually offset the energy that a million people put into the world. And then he used different, basically Messiah figures to illustrate that. Like a single Jesus offsets millions of people in terms of positive energetic output. Like people are positively impacted by the person who lived, or at least the apocryphal story of the person who lived. And so he was using that as an illustration of being a powerful force for good in the world. And so I've kind of thought of, not that I'm doing this very well yet, but I am working on it. I've started to see it as my responsibility to be one of the people that's countering the anxious energy that's in the collective unconscious. Like it's my job to produce so much positive energy inside of me during this time that I'm counteracting at least some of that by pumping good, positive energy into that matrix. And I don't know if I'll be super successful at that, but for the time I've seen that as my job. And so because of that, it means that I can't stay in a bad state. I have to be conscientious of my own, where I'm at and doing my own work on my own, on my energy. So even if I'm not counteracting any of that negative, all that negative stuff in the collective unconscious, even if I'm not actually successful at that, I'm definitely doing it for me, right? I'm at least putting up gatekeepers for that negative energy coming into me as a person. And at the best, I am doing the thing that I think is my job. At my best, I am creating enough positive energy where I can sort of put it back into the grid, so to speak. And then if enough people are doing that, you don't need everybody doing it. You just need a tipping point of people doing it. And so regardless of whether or not it works on a global level, which is unlikely, it's possible, I guess, but it's unlikely, but at least you can do it enough to counterbalance some of the results that you get when you're just slurping that negativity in you. Instead of that being the dynamic is actually pushing positive energy out to others. And I think it's a leverage point.
Okay, so what do you think? What has been coming up for you? What are techniques you're using? Are you introverted? Are you stuck by yourself or with other people? Are you extroverted, stuck by yourself with other people? Are you not stuck at all? You're just like, screw it, I'm going out anyway. Like, what's your lifestyle like right now?
I'm on spring break.
Yeah, I'm on spring break. Woo, Miami Beach. Like, what's going on for you? What's happening in your life? How are you dealing with this? What are some techniques, some leverage points, some things that you've discovered about yourself, about the people around you, about how you're wired and how you work? What learning is coming up for you? And what do you think about some of the ideas we've been talking about? What are the things you're going to implement going forward? Maybe some of the suggestions that we've given today on this show. We want to hear from you. You haven't had a microphone, but now's your chance to come over and make your voice heard over at personalityhacker.com. You can leave a comment or ask a question, or more importantly, share your story directly below this podcast. We'd love to hear from you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. If you are at home with not much to do, we have a book. It's called Personality Hacker. You can get it at all major digital retailers. We also have a lot of programs and actually a pretty good catalog of programs that, this is the time period to maybe do some personal growth and some introspection. So if that sounds interesting to you, please head to personalityhacker.com. And under catalog, you'll find all sorts of introspective personal growth programs that might be just right for you at this time.
Stay safe. Be well. We understand it's a tough time. We're in this together, and we will be connected, on more and more podcasts going forward. We want to have you part of this community. So don't go anywhere. Hang in there.
Hang in there. And if you're sick right now, our heart is with you. If you are going through a tough time being quarantined, our hearts are with you. And if you're one of those exceptions to the rule and having a particularly tough time, as Joel mentioned, hang tight, okay? We'll get through this. We are a resilient species, and just know that we're on your side. So,
yeah. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast.